Welcome to Advanced Nuclear, the official podcast of UCAN Power, where leading experts, innovators, and policymakers explore the latest developments shaping the future of nuclear energy. Thanks to our sponsors of Advanced Nuclear, whose support helps make these discussions possible. Aalo, energy without limits.
Welcome to Advanced Nuclear, the official podcast of UCAN Power, the United Coalition for Advanced Nuclear Power. I am your host, Dominique Cooper. Now, when you think about unlocking the next generation of AI, from training models that takes weeks and millions of dollars to powering data centers that need 24/7 electricity that's reliable, you're running straight into an energy problem. And companies that are solving it the fastest aren't always utilities you would expect. Today, we're talking to Yasir Arafat, co-founder and CTO, and the president of Aalo Atomics. Before starting Aalo, he led the microreactor applications research validation and evaluation project, later referred to as MARVEL, at the Idaho National Laboratory. And he also spent a decade at Westinghouse developing the Evinci microreactor program. Yasir dedicated his career to proving that advanced nuclear reactors built in factories, deployed at speed, and scaled for the AI era are what the world is missing. Right now, Aalo is 11 months away from a major milestone, achieving criticality on the Aalo X experimental reactor at Idaho National Laboratory on July 4th of this year. If they succeed, and I'm hoping they will, it will be the first new sodium-cooled reactor to operate in the U.S. in over 4 decades. Unbelievable. Now, I want to take a quick moment to note that the views expressed by our guest are his own. Yasir, welcome to Advanced Nuclear. Happy to have you.
Thank you for having me over. Yeah.
You grew up in Bangladesh, right?
That's correct.
All right. And I think a lot of us probably know that energy, or the lack of it, was a constant reality, right? Could you take us to a scene where you understood that energy was the lever for everything else in life? Like, what did you see?
Yeah, totally. So, and thanks for bringing this up. This is a profound moment in my life that kind of shaped essentially how my entire career, turned out to be. So I grew up in Bangladesh, where we used to have daily brownouts, and I remember when I was young, I did a lot of my homeworks by candlelight. And so that was very impactful growing up, seeing that kind of, power outages on a daily basis. On top of that, Bangladesh is also one of the most climate vulnerable countries on Earth. So as the Arctic ice caps melts, the sea level rises, and hundreds of acres people lose their homes to the ocean, and their homes disappear. And that was a very common occurrence when I turn on the Weather Channel. So from a very young age, I understood two things, right? One, the world needs a lot more energy than we have. And two, it has to be clean, right? It's not an intellectual position for me. It's a personal mission in many ways. So those two things, essentially kept me, pondering about, made me curious how electricity is formed, where does it come from at a very young age. And I started asking, I even went to explore where majority of Bangladesh's energy comes from, which is from the hydroelectric power plants, and got really curious about physics and electricity formation. And that kind of essentially changed, what I wanted to be when I wanted to grow up, was to focus on, how do we get abundant amount of energy and still, embark on ways how to generate them from clean sources. So when I came for college in the U.S., I didn't know much about nuclear at first, and later on during college, I stumbled across nuclear, and I was like, wow, now this is amazing. This is underdog technology. which provides 20% of the electricity in the US. And I don't know why we don't make more, because, if we can make this energy grow, it can truly solve the two curiosities that I grew up with when I was young. And that became my life's mission. I knew exactly that I wanted to go to nuclear. I wanted to push the frontier of nuclear energy. And I did get a chance to work on some of the most amazing programs, throughout my career in 16 years in nuclear. And now I think this is my fifth reactor design so far. So I'm pretty excited about that. A lot of compounded learning, but here's where we are.
Look, I what I almost didn't say this, but I can't help it. It's like, what an amazing sweet 16, right? Like where you are, you've been in this industry for 16 years, and this is such a sweet 16 for you. So congratulations for all of the things that you've been able to accomplish. And I'm always curious about a person's why and how it relates to their everyday life, because I know personally for myself, I'm more motivated. I'm more in the game when I know how it relates to me. And when I say me, like me is really not just me personally, but like my family, my friends, right? The people that are looking at us that probably knew nothing about nuclear energy, and creating that momentum and that interest to carry the mission forward. So thank you so much. All right. So, let's get into some of the amazing exploits that you've been involved in. So in 2014, you and a colleague sketched out Avinci on the back of a napkin at Westinghouse during lunch breaks. Like that makes for a great intro to your first book or next book. You saw a market gap, right? It was decentralized factory built reactors. Would you mind walking us through what you learned building Avinci, then what made Marvel, known as the Microreactor Applications Research Validation and Evaluation Project, different? And also, could you share like how that shaped what you're building at Aalo Atomics today?
No, totally. That's a good segue to how this all started. So early in my career, when I was in Westinghouse, I was mostly in the R&D department, working on solving either there were two categories, right? One is how do we solve old problems in existing power plants, and then the second category was, okay, what is it that we're not working on today that can really open up new markets for nuclear? And so as part of that R&D involvement, I got a chance to work on the AP1000 design, which is really the first new reactor the U.S. have built after 35 years of not building anything, mm-hmm. right? And I was brought in later in the stage. They started the construction before wrapping up the design, so they had to bring in a cleanup crew to essentially help close all the open issues. So I was part of that final design team. And I learned a lot, everything about how amazing these technologies really are, but also learned how complex and massive some of the execution can become. And then right after that, there was they pulled me into another program called a Westinghouse SMR, recently branded to AP300. Essentially, it was the same technology, but shrunk down to 1/3 the size. And that was really it. It wasn't, they're called SMR, but they're not really that small. Neither are they that very modular. They're basically 1/3 size of large scale reactors. And after we were going like full blown, developing that technology. At one point, our senior leadership said, no, we're gonna put that on the shelf, focus on getting AP1000 right, and then we'll come back to it. And that's when it started, I started pondering on this fundamental question. I'm like, wait a second. Why is nuclear just stuck in just baseload generation for large-scale utility plants? Why doesn't nuclear do anything else? I mean, if you look at fossil fuels, right, from our cars and stoves all the way to combined cycle gas plants, you find the entire spectrum. When you think about, solar, from rooftop solar all the way to gigawatt scale, you find the whole spectrum. Why is nuclear stuck in just one area? So that curiosity started making me explore where else could nuclear solve a problem. and not asking, okay, what's the right technology cool technology we should work on next. It wasn't about that. It was about what problem can we solve. And that curiosity kind of made me and another colleague start exploring on our own time and dime, just trying to understand like where else could nuclear play a role. And as part of that curiosity, we got to travel to a very remote community in northern Canada. It was so remote; it had only 1,200 people population. It was 20 miles south of the Arctic Circle. The only way you can get in and out is by planes, including all the energy that goes to the site is entirely based on diesel power. So it was the entire city was powered by diesel generators, not as a backup power, but main power. So we wanted to explore how energy is delivered to one of the most challenging areas in the world. And we spent a couple of weeks there, and we quickly realized, okay, the way we build nuclear reactors today is not going to work here. If we want to really provide power to remote communities or mines, we have to come up with a completely different kind of requirements. And what we learned was like, hey, you cannot do traditional construction because you can't excavate. There's permafrost underneath. You don't want to damage that. It has to be fully containerized. The diesel generator operator, the plant operator, was also our tour guide that wanted to show us around. And that's because the diesel power plant almost runs semi-autonomously. So we said, you know what, we can't have hundreds of people running this nuclear solution. It has to be very similar. It has to be a green button that says on and a red button that says off. And so we learned that, you can't, you have to make it so safe that you can walk away from the reactor. So containerization, walk-away safety, the fact that you have to build all of this in a factory and just like bring it to site and plug and play, all of these things that we learned on how this new solution would work, we came back from that trip and we said, you know what, I think we've got our market, and it has to be something extremely small form factor that fits all these requirements. And then we started, based on those learnings, the eVinci microreactor program. At the time, people didn't talk about microreactors whatsoever. We were one of the earliest one in the country. Yes, we've built small reactors in the past, but they were always stepping stones to becoming a larger reactor. But this was the first realization when we thought like, no, actually, we can actually have a commercial product that can remain small. And since Westinghouse was doing this, a lot of other companies started kind of following that same footstep. Now you can see a half a dozen companies. So in other words, what I learned from eVinci was that there's nothing fundamentally keeping nuclear from playing other roles than just serving the large-scale utility baseload plant. You can do something more, right? And then right before COVID, Department of Energy called me up and said, hey, Yasir, whatever you guys started, now there's a half a dozen company working on this, and we're trying to create a R&D program that can help all these companies get to market. Why don't you come help the DOE and join the National Laboratory? And I was like, well, I wanted to do eVinci fast, but because, I wasn't a part of a larger organization and they weren't moving as quickly as I would have liked.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, instead of helping one company get to market, let me maybe help 6 or 8 companies get to market. And again, I had a soft corner for not just eVinci but also the entire category of microreactors, because when we came back from that trip, I remember arguing with my colleague what we should call it, and we ended up naming it microreactors because we wanted to make it sound like when you hear the word, it automatically makes you feel like it's not your traditional reactor. It's not your grandfather's nuclear power plant. It's something totally different form factor. The name doesn't mean anything, by the way. But again, a few years later, Department of Energy recognized, hey, you know what? There's a bunch of companies wanting to build small reactors. We should recognize the class. And so they're like, oh, there's microreactors. You've got, factory built, transported by usual routes, and, walk away safe, between 1 to 50 megawatt small systems, and they're called microreactors. And then that was kind of like, oh, you know what? We were, are some of the early pioneers of this tech. I want to see some company make it to market. So I decided to move from Westinghouse to Idaho National Laboratory right before COVID, and then very quickly realized, okay, we can't solve the world's energy problem by having another R&D program. We need to build a real reactor. We've done a lot of paper reactors in the past, and everybody's design was on paper. We need to build something real. We just don't do this enough in nuclear. And so I started the Marvel program, and the idea was, let's go build a small microreactor that's within the means of the National Laboratory, entirely federal funded, and make this very, very quickly. Instead of taking 30 years to build a new reactor, let's go try to build it in less than 4. So that was a kind of all the learning from my previous life was like, here's all the 14 principles that can allow us to move fast. And we actually did. Even though we were in a government research environment, from an ideation to getting full approval from the regulator to start constructing this reactor, we got the whole thing down under less than 3 years.
Oh, wow.
And
impressive.
That took a lot of notice from industry. So we learned how to do things fast. We learned how to essentially design in a reactor in a small form factor. And we put together an amazing team that is, in my mind, was one of the best teams ever. So to wrap it up, if you think about what I did in the last 16 years, even though the Aalo is only just 2.5 years company, the whole idea was 16 years in the making. I designed 5 reactors, tried to maximize my learning as much as I could from all the experts in the field, went to grad school 4 times, dropped out of 3, and read any books that I could run into, and just to understand and solve this one question, which was, how do we manufacture nuclear reactors at scale? Not just design them, but manufacture them. And Marvel was that first program that kind of was the initial, eventually was the initial spark, but Marvel was when we showed that we could actually do it. And it really proved a lot of first of a kind. But the most important learning in Marvel was that you can actually build and move fast in nuclear and still get regulatory approval. And that lesson became the DNA of Aalo. When we started Aalo, we brought the DNA over, right? And Marvel also taught me, there are some things that won't scale when we wanted to build hundreds of reactors, right? For example, it's the fuel, right? We started off the same fuel as Marvel did, which is uranium zirconium hydride. It's a fantastic fuel. A lot of research reactors use it, have a very quick response from a safety perspective, but there's no supply chain. So when I started Aalo and we started with this fuel form, I already knew what to keep and what to throw away, and fuel was one of them because there was absolutely no supply chain for that fuel. So if you think about everybody in the advanced nuclear space, they always start off by designing a beautiful reactor around some exotic fuel that doesn't exist in a commercial supply chain. So at Aalo, we said, let's flip that. So we did not come up with a beautiful design and a fuel design. We started off with existing available fuel that we have today, which is uranium dioxide, less than 8% enrichment, not 20%. And we said, let's go design a reactor around it so that it is the most powerful reactor that we can put on the back of a truck. And that one decision kind of unlocked everything in terms of our speed, ability to hit cost targets, and our ability to scale to hundreds of reactors a year. So everyone's kind of thinking about how to solve the first reactor. We're thinking about how do we build the next 100.
Absolutely. I love this. I love this. So you have, some things are turning on in my head. You talked about the 14 principles. I'd love to pull the thread on that. But before we get into the 14 principles, could we spend a moment just talking about when you met your co-founder, Matt Lossick?
Yeah. So halfway through Marvel, I was getting a lot of calls and introductions from all over the world, right? People are like, hey, you guys are, everyone's talking about advanced nuclear, but you guys are actually building it. I'm like, yeah, cool. So I met a lot of entrepreneurs that were interested in starting up a company, and I've had that entrepreneurial itch since my days in Westinghouse, because I felt like I can provide a value to society in a way that was a real gap that I've seen. So Matt was the seventh entrepreneur who reached out to me. All the previous ones, there was some mismatch. Either they weren't in it for the right reason, or they didn't have the right vision for where nuclear had to become, for this next generation, or like they were in it just for the money of it. It just didn't click in every areas. So halfway through Marvel, I met Matt, and we very quickly, got along very well. We both have very complementary skill sets. We both wanted nuclear to thrive in ways that it could become ubiquitous, where this becomes the household energy form for the future of humanity. No longer do we have to rely on combustion and burning things, which involves chemical reaction. Now we found the code to split an atom and unleash like tremendously large amount of energy. This has to become the future of humanity's next phase of energy utilization. And then we both have this intense love for good design. So we really like matched on different levels. And very quickly we realized we wanted to partner up and actually like take what I've done in the nuclear industry, what he has done in the software world, bring both of these things together and take nuclear to the next level. So yeah, we, there was a big 1 year pause in between, because I said, you know what, I started Marvel and I want to make sure we get to a point where we finish the design and we get full regulatory approval. Only then I will transition. And that happened late 2023. I came over from Marvel, brought the team together. In fact, a lot of my first team members were from Marvel program, because they already knew how to work together. They already were itching to work on Marvel 2.0. So it kind of made sense to bring that team over. And then we put together another set of team members from the aerospace, automotive, and the oil and gas sector, and brought the manufacturing muscle to that team, and really got onto this mission of mass manufacturing nuclear reactors. So yeah, can elaborate more on that.
So I as a fellow engineer myself, it sounds as if not only is the technical piece there, the personal connective tissue that's there, like this is why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm connected to the mission for this reason. It also sounds like you have a bit of like marketing and branding. It's like I didn't go to school for that, but I have a love for that as well. It's like really how to get out there and make. Pull some things together to really ensure that when someone hears it, they get it. And then also, oh my gosh, like really good at being purposeful and intentful about choosing a good partner to carry forth the mission with you, to go on the journey with you. That is absolutely fantastic. So thank you for sharing that.
Of course.
So a lot of reactor developers, they chase any customer who will take it. I already know that is not your vibe. Aalo Atomics is saying our first customer is an AI data center operator, which is, I would say, the first of its kind. Why? Like, why is that the case? And how does that focus change the technology choices that you're making?
No, that's a great question. In fact, that's really what got us all started to begin with. When we first started Aalo, the only thing we knew was like, hey, we've really landed on technology that has all this untapped potential, which is sodium-cooled, basically liquid metal-cooled reactors that can be brought together in a very small form factor, right? We were like, oh, you know what? We can actually play a role in anybody that wants electricity, right? But turns out, if you want to provide or build a product for everyone, you're not building the ideal product for anyone.
Right.
So very quickly, we did a lot of work on where we wanted to focus on. And then very early on, and again, this was before everybody started talking about AI and everything, we said, you know what, AI data centers is really the market we want to hit. Because if you think about the in the last 50, 70 years, the largest load growth that we have seen in recent times was in AI data centers. No, we have not seen. I mean, if you think about like the energy projection over the next 5 years alone, we need 100 more gigawatts. That's equivalent to 100 Houston worth of power, and the grid is not designed to do that. So we found that very intriguing, and because we're also a big proponent of AI, we really wanted to solve the problem for that market. And so when you look into our product, it's quite different. I mean, every nuclear company thinks about their reactor as the product, but reactor is just a gadget, right? The product is really the overall power plant. So when we designed our power plant, we talked to hundreds of customers across the AI data center industry, and we really tried to understand what would be an ideal product market fit. If you can just pick any nuclear reactor, just making electrons, yeah, you can provide them electricity, but is that really going to solve their problems? So we were very methodical about how we design our product. And if you look into the Aalo Pod, which is our first product for AI data centers, it's not a very traditional system from a nuclear perspective. It's basically a single power plant that has 5 reactors, 10 megawatt each, okay, and they're connected to a single or multiple turbines. And why did we do that? That's kind of a strange configuration if you think about it, right? It's a 50 megawatt plant with 5 reactors and multiple turbines. Why didn't we just have a single big reactor or, multiple smaller ones? The reason we did this because we really found that what AI data centers really care about in the future is ultimately go and untether themselves from the grid. And for that, they need the same reliability as what the grid wants, which is how do these AI data centers get 99.9% availability or 5.9 reliabilities from the energy source? And right now, without the grid, there is no other solution, right? So if we have multiple reactors in a power plant and we have like many copies of this, if one reactor is down for refueling or maintenance or outage, the other 4 can operate to max power to get the same power output. If we have one turbine down for a maintenance, same thing. You have other redundant turbines to back it up. So that, we're not solving the problem for AI data centers today necessarily. We're solving their problem that they need to solve in the next couple of years in the future. So we're really focused on this pod design, and we said, you know what? This is great because the technology and learning that we brought over from Marvel, this is really the most energy dense reactor I can build at that size that is still factory manufacturable, right? So if you think about why this market, the initial question, for the first time in the last 70 years, AI data centers provided that much demand to justify building a factory, right? The idea of factory-built reactors have always been around since the 50s, but you don't see like a nuclear manufacturing factory like how we make cars or jet engines around. And that's because we didn't have large enough demand like this before. So it really fit within our factory-first model as well. So it all converges. We call this the alignment of the stars, right? The people wanted it. There's a new market that wants it. The private sector wanted to invest in a lot in new nuclear. The government is, pouring in a lot of investments to make this happen. And finally, the public is turning around and educating themselves, saying, "Hey, nuclear is not as bad as what our fathers and grandfathers taught us. Actually, if you look at the real data, it's quite different story." And so we actually need nuclear because it is, clean, reliable, 24/7 power. That can really unlock the problems that we want to solve today, whether it's be, generating clean power or just securing energy security for the country. So in either direction, regardless of what your political views are, nuclear can help solve that problem, right? So that all converged to why we selected. But ultimately, our goal is not just provide power to AI data centers. We have this secret 3-stage plan, well, not so secret, First is we
exclusive. I thought I was going to get an exclusive.
We provide power to AI data centers and build hundreds of these reactors, come down the cost curve. And then the next market we want to solve is the industrial sector, which requires a lot of power or heat for desalination, for providing clean energy to an upstream power, or whatever that, or ammonia production, whatever that may be. There's a lot of industrial sector that actually wants power on their site within their control. We can solve that problem. And then the last phase would be when we can bring down the cost so low that anybody can afford this technology, then we would go out in all the developing countries around the world, like Bangladesh, for example, and provide them unlimited power so that no kid has to grow up, studying under a candlelight.
Under a candlelight. That is beautiful. That is absolutely beautiful. So for people who don't necessarily understand your approach to how you are cooling your reactors, could you talk about why sodium for you guys? Like why UO2 over any other options? Like what are the trade-offs? And could you talk about like what the gains are?
Okay, so for folks that are not familiar with nuclear, and if you peek into the world of nuclear and all the nuclear nerds, if you talk to them, they all have their favorite reactor technologies, okay? And the way we even name the reactors is actually not around the nuclear fuel at all. The naming convention is after what type of coolant you use, because the type of fluid that you use to cool the reactor, it has a profound impact on how your rest of the system becomes, right? So if you look at all of the 92, 93 reactors commercially that are operating nuclear power plants in the United States that are providing 20% of our electricity today, they're all based on a technology called light water reactors,
right,
or pressurized water reactors, right? So what you do is like you basically have a bunch of metallic rods that contains nuclear fuel, and you generate heat, and you basically have a big tank of water that wants to take that heat and drive a turbine. But you can't drive a turbine unless you raise the temperature. What happens when you heat water beyond 100 degrees Celsius? It boils away, right? So
right,
you don't want to boil it away. You want to basically like pressurize it and keep that at if you pressurize a system, you can allow it to stay in the liquid phase and not have it boil away, and operate 300 degree or 330 degrees Celsius, enough temperature that you can actually generate steam and drive a turbine, right? So all of our existing power plants that are commercial are mostly pressurized system using water as a coolant.
Right.
Which is all fantastic, right? This is a mature technology, is plenty safe, plenty reliable. They work amazingly well. But the challenge is for you to build one of these plants, it takes a very long time, and it has to do a lot to do with how, what coolant you use. If you have a pressurized system, your reactor vessel, and this is my flask, I'm not a reactor vessel, but I'm going to illustrate this. You will need a very thick wall of a vessel to hold that pressure. So the reliable way to build large pressure reactor vessels with thick walls is a method called forging. And there's only few places in the world that can forge large nuclear reactor vessels. They're super expensive, hundreds of millions of dollars, and it takes 2 to 4 years minimum to get one of these. So that really drives the timeline and the cost to get, to build just even a simple thing as a reactor vessel. It's not that simple, but, one of the key components. So we said, okay, well, how do we change that? If we want to build factory-built nuclear reactors, is that the right technology? What we found, the answer was no. We need to build a reactor that is non-pressurized, so we can use thin walls. And if we use thin-walled vessels, we can bring in steel plates, roll them up in a roller, and weld it shut, and have a header and a dish bottom, and you get a vessel. So what normally takes a very long time, like 2 to 4 years to build, we can build similar vessels here in our factory in about 2 weeks. That's a huge change from a couple of years to about a few weeks. So that one decision essentially unlocked our factory manufacturing approach in many ways. And sodium is also an amazing coolant. It is 100 times more thermally conductive than water. It's plenty available in the surroundings, and it's extremely compatible from a chemistry perspective with that of structural steel that holds it. So you don't have like long-term corrosion issues and other things. As long as you maintain the oxygen concentration, these things can last, for decades without having any chemistry problems, which is usually the biggest bottleneck in long-term operation. So all in all, we found sodium to be the best choice for us, and it also turns out to be the most. It has the highest operational experience than any other advanced reactors, other than water, which is not an advanced reactor, by the way. So we are basically like leveraging a lot of the lessons learned from all the sodium-cooled reactors that the United States have built over the last 70 years. And we're trying to take those learnings and figuring out modern ways how to build them faster, better, cheaper, and be able to lower the cost of energy overall.
I love it. I love it. So let me ask you this. Let's move over to, I would say, maybe in my everyday language, like let's move over to the T. So in June 2025, the Department of Energy selected 10 companies, including Aalo Atomics, for the reactor pilot program, right? And the goal was to achieve criticality by July 4th of this year. That's a couple of months away. Like, what does that deadline mean for you guys operationally? How are you resourcing it? And you hit it. What changes?
Yes, I mean, this is really the turning point, and a lot of people don't understand what criticality means. So I'm just going to quickly cover that real quick. Criticality means when you first build a nuclear reactor and you demonstrate you can sustain a nuclear chain reaction for the first time. That's called initial criticality. You don't necessarily have to crank the power just yet. You're just turning the reactor on, and you're showing that all your design worked, all your nuclear material, is working. All your control systems that you used to make the reactor operational is working. All your detectors, instrumentation, electrical, all of that is working properly. It is the first big real hardware validation you can actually do for a real machine. Why is this important? Because there were so many designs of nuclear reactors that are advanced, but nothing made to the hardware space. So everything before criticality is theory. Everything after criticality is all real. And so President Trump, when he took office last year, he said, like, okay, we've done a lot of R&D work. I need to see 3 reactors achieve criticality by July 4th of 2026. And at that time, we had it was a year away, right? You can't even fathom that speed. In nuclear, it normally takes like many years or decades long to get a new reactor built. Most of the industry said, "Oh no, that's impossible. We can't do this. Let's get out of here." Right? So, but only a few said, "You know what? We want to give it a try." And most of these are smaller reactors, right? And so our moat, our edge, as we think, is that Aalo is the fastest company in nuclear. And what better way to prove that to build a reactor under 12 months from scratch, right? And by the time Aalo got selected, we only had 10 months to prove it out, right?
Yeah.
So, by the way, the reason why this year was selected is because America turns 250. It's our 250th birthday, and some amazing milestones are being pursued, including the Artemis II, which just sent astronauts around the moon for the first time in over 50 years. And similarly on the nuclear space, we're building a new reactor in the desert of Idaho, proving that we can sustain a chain reaction. And this is going to be the first new reactor to be built at Idaho National Lab after like 50 years. So we're conquering both the challenges on Earth as well as the moon on America's 250th birthday. Pretty historic in my mind.
All I'm going to say is I'm expecting a special episode of your vlog, because I know Aalo has a vlog. I've been following you guys. I'm expecting a special episode on July 4th, or in honor of July 4th, and
yes,
us turning
totally
50 years old. Yeah, that's going to be.
So just to give
exciting.
you no, totally, and just to give you a validation point on how quickly we're moving. So we essentially built our entire reactor building at Idaho National Lab in 36 days. We manufactured our first reactor in less than 4 weeks in our factory here behind me, as you can see here. And we, assembled it on the site in about a week. And now we're at the final stages of regulatory approval, essentially our final test to see if we're completely ready to prepare ourselves as a nuclear reactor facility and load fuel and turn the machine on. So we're literally weeks away from achieving that goal. So if you ask me, like, are we going to hit July 4th? The answer is absolutely yes. But it's the question for us every day in Aalo is like, how soon can we do this, right? So we're essentially counting every hour, every day, trying to move through all the nitty-gritty details. Even though we're moving fast, the idea is not like to make it unsafe. Right? We're not letting speed compete with quality or safety. We're ensuring all of the quality standards, all the safety standards in the industry as much as possible, but also do it pretty fast, right? So our entire team is pretty jazzed up about it. So we're going to make it.
Look, you don't run fast without being equipped, right? So, again, the last couple of minutes that we've been chatting, I don't think that you would have felt comfortable running as fast as you guys are running without being equipped. So, and you have your sweet 16 years of experience along with your team, pushing you guys towards making history, which was that again, it's exciting for me, like as someone who is highly supportive of what you guys are doing. So let's move into some recent things at the NRC. Today is the 23rd. So not even a month ago, almost a month ago, the NRC finalized Part 53, which is a big deal. I mean, I don't think they've done anything with the licensing framework. I don't even know if I was born. So this is something big, and it's designed for advanced reactors and not just LWRs. Now let's talk about what that means for Aalo. I'm sorry, what that means for Aalo. How is that game changing? Like, what doors are now open that were originally closed?
Yeah, no, totally. You're absolutely correct. This is the first new modern, what we call technology inclusive licensing framework NRC has released after like nearly 4 decades, right? So it's a huge deal. What that means is like no longer do we have to use the old framework, which was purely based around light water reactor technologies. And what people have done, like if they were building advanced reactors and they go to the NRC, they would essentially say, okay, you know what, I'm going to take that framework that was built for water-based technologies, and I'll basically like try to justify how my advanced reactor fits in that framework, right? So there would be a lot of exemptions and things that would normally not be part of the regulatory framework you have to justify. That all changed, right? So Part 53 officially formalizes a framework where you can bring any technology you want. Doesn't have to be water-cooled reactors. And it's not going to be a prescriptive approach. Rather, it's a risk-informed, performance-based, which is a mouthful for people outside of nuclear industry. They don't know what it means. But basically, it's saying like, if I can prove my reactor is safe and I can provide the right evidence and data to the regulator, then they would use that evidence to approve the license instead of, prescribing like thou shall have this, thou shall have that, and all the, 60 to 70 different list items, right? It's not prescriptive, it's deterministic. So that's a big deal for us. And when reactor pilot program started, by the way, before even the executive orders came out, Aalo made a conscious choice to build our first reactor under Department of Energy. When executive order was officialized, we were already part of the DOE authorization process. We just, wanted to speed that up and get it to the finish line. So we had a little bit of a leg up there. But what's happening is the goal of the reactor pilot program was never to just turn on a reactor and be done, right? The goal was, how do we take that fully functional operational reactor and use it to commercialize a real reactor under the NRC? So they have been working together in the past. So the benefit of Part 53 is now we've got a framework where we can actually pursue a license for an advanced reactor officially for the NRC, but we can also leverage every work we have done on the DOE side because it's the same technology. And all regulators ask for the same questions. Is your reactor safe? Make your claims. make the argument why they're safe, and show me the evidence. So claim, argument, evidence. Both DOE and NRC ask for the same question. So if we have already proven it once under DOE, we can take all of that work, wrap it around Part 53 framework, and get it licensed very, very quickly. So we're actually in talks right now with the NRC to leverage this new framework, and we're intending to submit a commercial license application this year to the NRC, which is pretty exciting, and we hope to get that approval turned around very quickly.
Wow. Wow. So let's talk about partnerships. You've announced partnerships with companies like Global Nuclear Fuel and other suppliers. And a constant thing that we've discussed on this podcast is obviously the supply chain, right? In this industry, it's thin, and when you talk about advanced designs, it becomes even more of an issue, potentially more of an issue. How are you building that ecosystem?
Yeah, totally. So from the beginning of Aalo, we knew that supply chain is a big problem in nuclear industry, and we need to solve that from day one. So every technology choice we have made, every decision we have made so far was geared around one basic principle. Thou shalt have no unobtainium in our reactor. What that means is either we'll have to have a way to make it ourselves. So we focus a lot on vertical integration and build things ourselves. But we can't build everything. We also need to buy a few things from others. And so whatever things we cannot build ourselves, we'll have to have reliable partners that we can procure those components from, like pumps, turbines, sensors, things we don't build today at Aalo, right? So we've been putting a lot of energy and effort trying to build that ecosystem so that we end up in a situation where we know exactly who to rely on to build these reactors. So far, we've had more than 140 suppliers across 35 states and 6 countries, trying to make sure we've got a robust supply chain to ensure that, there is no unobtainium. And for that, we did have to make some choices that were not ideal. Some designs look amazing on paper, but we have no way to get the material or qualify it under some code and standards, or be able to find a supply chain that can provide the components to us. So we didn't want to pursue those, unobtainium designs, right? We wanted to pick something that we can actually build the first reactor out of, but also all these partners we're working with, like GE, Nuclear Fuel, Urenco, or Flowserve for pumps, or Baker Hughes for turbines. All these companies were saying, hey guys, we're going to scale. And when we do, we want 3 things from you. Make sure you match our price, you match our quality, and also you can scale as we scale, right? And that's how we're kind of building the supply chain from ground up, because we're really gearing up towards making hundreds of reactors. So again, what you see behind me is our pilot factory. It's only 40,000 square feet. It's an R&D center. It's not a factory, right? We're trying to figure out how to build 1Z, 2Z reactors here, and how to get the manufacturing line designed and tested out. But truly, where the rubber meets the road is when we build the first nuclear assembly line, which doesn't exist anywhere. And we're launching the first phase of that this year. And that's your announcement right here, right? So we're launching a 250,000 square feet phase 1 of our what we call the gigawatt factory that can build multiple reactors a year. We're going to scale this up from 250,000 square feet to 1 million square feet by 2028. So we can build 100 of our reactors every single year, right? And a key answer that everybody faces is we can try to put all our heads together and try to scale up, but you don't have enough fuel. So we selected uranium dioxide fuel. That's a commercially available fuel. And because of that, we don't have to worry about when we scale up to hundreds of reactors a year, where's our fuel going to come from? We have solved that problem.
Oh my gosh. So I love no unobtainable designs. That's brandable. You should put that somewhere on and that and the new factory that you guys are building. And thank you so much for the exclusive. That is going to be fantastic. Wow. So you kind of touched on this already, but I want to make some space just for you to elaborate a bit more on um, productizing nuclear energy. Treating it like a hardware problem and not necessarily a construction project. Um, Matt is obviously important because he brings a software mindset into the picture. As we discussed earlier, and I don't ever recall nuclear working that way. So, what does productizing nuclear energy mean in terms of operations?
Yeah, great question. One that we've been secretly solving for the last many, many months. Sleepless nights trying to crack this code. Right? If you look at nuclear power plants that we can find today, they're all projects. Meaning, you bring all the people, equipment, modules into a site where you want to build a plant, and you do a stick build approach. Right?
Mm-hmm.
And doing things on site with new people, new team every single time, that really creates a lot of uncertainty. So if you want to build a gigawatt scale plant today in the West, the first one in Vogel, it took us 18 years to build, where the plan was 9 years, right? Maybe if you build a couple of them, you will get a little bit better, but it still is going to take you multiple years, at least 6+ or 8+ years to build a gigawatt scale plant. So we asked ourselves, is there a better model that can help us scale much faster than a gigawatt scale project type nuclear power plants? So one of our key theses in Aalo is we are no longer designing nuclear reactor power plants to be built as projects, but rather products. Right?
Products.
What that means is like 95% of the hardware is built in the factory, where only 5% is actually left on the site. So you basically bring all of these pre-manufactured modules and pull them together like Lego blocks in a matter of days, not years, to be able to provide power to the site. So the factory model is an important element of that, but that is just one out of the 6 major areas you have to solve. You have to figure out a way how to manage the supply chain to build hundreds of these reactors. You have to come up with a design that you can build majority, like 95% of them in the factory. What does that design look like? You have to make all of these modules that have to go from the factory to the site, all built as transportable modules. So you don't, everything, including the equipment, the piping, the power, the insulation, the framework, structural, everything is pre-made, and you bring them to site like Lego blocks and you connect them together, right? So we need to reinvent how we build these components. How do we license them? So when we look into Part 53, like, we can't think about like project-based licensing. We have to think about how do we productize licensing as well. Otherwise, licensing will become the bottleneck. Construction. What is the construction technique that can allow us to build a nuclear building in a matter of days, not years, right?
Yeah.
That's a whole different problem we have to solve. So all of these like 5 or 6 areas you have to solve to make sure that, our ultimate goal is, by the time a customer calls us and said, Aalo, we need one of your pods, or we need like 20 pods or 30 pods. By the time we get the order to the time we deliver electrons, we can do it under 12 months, right? That's our goal. And that is very, very aggressive. That includes all the licensing, all the supply chain, the manufacturing, the installation, the construction work, the commissioning, and putting the power up on the solution. That's a very tough problem to solve, but we are that's our company goal, to get there very soon, one day. Because if you look at AI data centers today, they're built in a matter of 2 to 3 years for a gigawatt scale data center, right? Nuclear power plants currently takes about 10 years. And if we can match that 2 to 3 year time frame, and this framework, this new model works, then for the first time we would build at the same speed, if not faster, than what data centers are really looking for. And so from the whole goal of product market fit, that actually aligns very nicely with AI data centers.
Wow. So I want to transition into A lightning round. It's like one of my favorite
Okay.
things to do. And I know that you're familiar with the lightning round because you do it also on your YouTube. So I have a few
Yeah.
questions. You know that you have less than 60 seconds to answer. Don't
All right.
overthink it. Yeah. And let's make it fun. Are you ready?
That's good.
All right. If you had an extra $50 million tomorrow, no strings attached, to accelerate advanced nuclear, what's the one thing you do?
I would go put that and accelerate our factory buildup, hands
Easy.
down. Yeah, it's just accelerating what we've already planned, not coming up with brand new ideas, right?
Right, right. Okay, so let's talk about the biggest misconception. What do policymakers and the public get wrong about advanced nuclear?
It's the waste. 'Cause,
Yeah,
even the name, like people call it the waste. In the nuclear industry, we call it spent nuclear fuel because only like
exactly.
5 or 6% is actually used. The rest is recoverable. So, so that's a huge misconception. A lot of people think nuclear waste is something that is a problem. No, not really. If you look at all the nuclear waste for the last 70 years that we used commercially to provide 20% of the US electricity, if you take all of that waste into one place, it's going to be the size of a football field. And it's like very, very compact. It's not like the green goo you see at The Simpsons. It's actually solid metallic rods. And majority of that is reusable. So that's a misconception that we have in the public sector. Used nuclear fuel has never affected a single plant or an animal or a human being. Those are the most that to me is a success story for nuclear because our waste form is so small and so compact and it does not move around like everybody. I mean, if you think about the fossil fuel industry, they're trying to do carbon capture, trying to trap the waste that they're creating
Yeah.
into a small form factor. Well, guess what? Nuclear already does that. Our waste is already in a compact solid form where it does not move around everywhere else. So I think that's a big misconception. We can do a lot better at communicating that to the public. But yeah, that's the biggest one.
Oh my gosh, like you're giving me so many brandable moments. I just want you to know that. Um, um, next question. All right, so by 2030, which of these happens first? The US achieves 10 gigawatts of advanced reactor capacity online. B, AI data center is powered entirely by a single advanced reactor. Or C, a second country deploys a factory built advanced reactor at commercial scale.
B.
Okay. And
B is the
AI data
solid answer.
centers.
And here's
Yeah.
why. Yeah, because an AI data center powered entirely by a nuclear reactor. So I can't speak for everybody else, but I can speak for myself and for Aalo Atomics. We are building a year from now a full powered reactor right by the critical test reactor we're building to go critical by July 4th. We're building a full power reactor that can make 10 megawatt electric power. And we're also building a small data center right next to it and working with a lot of data center partners to actually take that electricity that we're building and power the data center that's next door so we can basically for the first time demonstrate how an AI data center and a nuclear power plant can be co-built and co-located to operate as a singular unit. So that's happening next year, not even by 2030. And by 2028 and 2029, we're going to have more commercial products that's going to exclusively power AI data center. So B is my solid answer. I think that's our company goal. We're essentially crunching through that problem. And before the end of the decade, we'll see multiple data centers running on our Aalo pods.
Oh my gosh. So I was gonna say again, I kind of had this visual. I'm like, you guys are doing so much so quickly. I mean, Allo has to be filled with a bunch of superhumans, right? Like I'm convinced that that's essentially what it is. Last question. Who's an engineer, scientist, or leader, living or historical, who's worked on energy or anything nuclear inspired that has shaped your approach?
That is an interesting question because my approach has been a collection of a decade and a half of learning from everyone that I encountered so far. It's hard to pinpoint a singular person. Like when we hire somebody, even right now at Aalo, even though like I'm at the kind of like the top of the company, right? Everybody else is like in the I am like we make sure when we go and hire people at Aalo, they're significantly smarter than me and Matt, right? They're always, we hire the very best out there so that we can learn from them. We don't hire smart people to tell them how to do things so that they can tell us what's the best thing to do, right? We set the vision and we set all the framework and architecture, but it's really learning can be done from nature, from the most simplest benign thing to almost every daily person that you encounter. Like, for example, I learned so much things from my wife, for example, who is not even an engineer, who has nothing to do with nuclear. She's a nurse. But I learn about like the human aspect, the people connection and how to deal with team members. I learned a lot from her throughout our marriage, for example. So I can, once you think about learning as a journey and not a single state point, I think I cannot point out to a single person. It has to be, every single engineer that I've met in my life, every single mentor that I've had so far, every employees that we have right now. I'm learning every day from them, and it's making us better and stronger. So yeah, it's. I wish I could give you a singular answer.
Well, I want to just say thank you for your leadership. Your leadership is, definitely evident in the answers to my questions today, and even in just our engagement virtually. So thank you for your leadership. Your passion, your conviction is evident. It's energetic. It's contagious. It's all over you. And so thank you for that. And I had to, I couldn't help but do this. I said, I wrote this down while you were talking. Your leadership, your passion, your conviction, your energy, it's electric. No pun intended. You guys at Aalo, you guys at Aalo, you are illuminating, and sometimes darkness can have a negative connotation, but I don't mean it in that way. You guys are illuminating dark areas that have not necessarily seen light. You are definitely empowering what some would consider to be impossible. So you are making the impossible possible. And so thank you for that. Very last thing here before closing remarks, or actually, if you like, you could answer this in your closing remarks. I know earlier in our conversation before we got started, I was like, hey, is it Aalo or Aalo? And you shared a wonderful story behind the genesis, the origin of the name. So if you don't mind, in your closing remarks, could you share the genesis, the story behind the name?
Yeah, totally. So Matt and I, when we were first exploring and trying to see what name we should call our company, and one that is, very, it's a reflection of what we want to build as a company. And we stumbled across, and we started with like 250 names, but we ended up with Aalo. Aalo is basically the literal word for light in Bengali, where essentially I grew up. And the word resonated to us because Aalo means sunlight, brightness, or hopeful future, and that's essentially what we want to create, a company that can not only bring light or provide energy, but also create a better future for humanity. And you talked about an amazing right before you asked me the question was, if you think about light, and if you look at a globe from outer space, and at nighttime you look at the Earth, you'll see like flickers of light around the globe, right? But if you think about that, more than 50% of the world's population live in 3% of the land, meaning there's plenty of spaces on planet Earth that is uh, currently not habitable, but we can make it habitable by bringing unlimited clean energy to that place. Imagine a desert that has no infrastructure whatsoever, but if you provide a reliable clean energy source, you can create an oasis around it or a floating city in the middle of the ocean. So yes, it's very, people get excited about going out and settle in Mars and other planets. That's truly like exciting. I get it. But there's so many places on this earth that we can change into habitable areas. So we have a saying in Aalo, like, hey, at Aalo, we can actually make uninhabitable places habitable. And that's a future that we want to unlock here on earth.
Aalo, 11 months from the genesis of when they found out. Fast forward to July 4th, 2026, the first new sodium-cooled reactor in 40 plus years. If you're right, if a team of dozens become hundreds, if factory built becomes a standard, if economics work, you're not just building a company, you're proving that a new atomic age is actually possible. Not someday, but in this decade. I want to thank you again for being on Advanced Nuclear. And for our listeners, oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And for our listeners, advanced nuclear technology is moving faster than policy. I mean, Aalo is proving that. If you work in energy, defense, infrastructure, or policy, this is your moment to shape how these technologies deploy. UCAN Power exists to accelerate that conversation. So if you have a chance, get a moment, visit ucanpower.org to learn more. And thanks for listening to Advanced Nuclear. I am Dominique Cooper. See you next time.
Building education for energy. B, activates communities, educates the next generation, and makes energy careers visible, real, and worth chasing. Learn more at bcamp.org.
Thanks for joining us on Advanced Nuclear, powered by UCAN Power. If this episode brought clarity to the future of American energy, share it with someone shaping policy or industry. I'm Dominique Cooper. This is the moment. This is the movement. See you on the next episode.